So my name is Paul Wilson. I'm one of the lecturers here in the School of Psychology, and I'm currently the course director for the undergraduate program. So the degree program is a 3-year Bachelor of Science degree. It's accredited by the British Psychological Society, so it's accredited by the professional body for psychology in the United Kingdom. So this slide shows you the overview of what your first year in the program would look like. So you study 3 year-long modules: Foundations of Psychology, an Introduction to Methods in Psychology, and Using Psychology in Everyday Life. So within the Foundations of Psychology module, you would be introduced to all of the core domains of the psychological science. So those core domains are cognitive psychology, which is the area of psychology that looks at how we think and how we process information. So it's a study of mental processes. Developmental psychology looks at how humans age over time, so looking at how we develop through childhood, but also into older age as well. Social psychology is the domain of the discipline that looks at how we behave as groups, as social groups. So how we identify as belonging to members of groups, the processes that happen when groups come into conflict with one another, is all covered in that domain. Psychobiology looks at the biological basis of behavior. So it looks at the role of genetics, brain function, brain structure, hormones, and how those biological processes come together to influence and result in behaviors. And then my area, individual differences, looks at how people as individuals differ from one another and the reasons for those differences in behavior that are unique to an individual. Then in the Introduction to Methods in Psychology, we take a step back and we look at where psychology has come from. So psychology really started off as an area of philosophy and then split off as a scientific discipline around 100 and 120 years ago. So we look at the history of psychology and also look at the conceptual issues. So these are the big unanswered questions in psychology that researchers are currently working on. Then in this module, we also focus in on research methods. So in other words, how we collect data on human behavior in order to analyze it and look for the causes behind behavior and influences of behavior. So we look at how we design experiments, how we collect behavioral data, either numerically or verbally. And then we also look at how we analyze those different types of data as well. So you get a very gentle introduction to things like statistical analysis starting in this module in your first year. Then in the third module, using psychology in everyday life, we look at the practical applications of psychology that you see in the world around you. So this module takes the form of a series of week-long programs where you would look at a different context of psychology in action in the real world. And what I've given you in the table is some examples of what you would be studying on a weekly basis. So one week you might be looking at how psychology informs us regarding the performance of elite athletes in sport. Another week you might be looking at how body language is used in everyday life, bilingualism, hypnosis, binge drinking. The psychology of magic looks at the psychological processes behind optical illusions and magical tricks. So you can see there's a very varied application of ways to apply psychology in everyday life that you'll cover in that module. Then in the second year, this is really the core part of the program. So just like first year, you would study all of the main domains of psychology in a lot more depth and also in a lot more breadth. So I won't go through that list again, but you would cover the same domains just in much more detail at level 2. In addition to that, we also focus more on employability. So at this point, you're halfway through the degree, and you'll have been thinking about employability from first year, but second year is really the time when we want you to be thinking seriously about what you're going to do post-graduation and putting plans in place to make sure you're in the best position possible on graduation to fulfill your ambitions. So we actually incorporate employability within the degree program. So you will do a series of lectures on the psychology of employability. So you'll be applying your psychological knowledge in practice in the area of occupational psychology, and you'll also be completing an employability portfolio where you will self-reflect on the skills that you have developed across the course of your degree, and identify areas that you'd like to focus on to improve by the time you graduate. So again, this is year 2 is a 3-module structure. So you would do 2 modules focusing on the core domains of psychology and employability. And then the 3rd module that you would study across the second year of the program is psychological methods. So again, we look at in more detail how we gather data on human behavior and how we analyze it. So this is the module where you would learn more complex ways to analyze patterns in behavioral data. So we look at how we gather data in more detail in research methods. We look at how we analyze qualitative data. So qualitative data is verbal data that you gather through things like focus groups and interviews with participants, and then how we analyze numerical data that we collect from people, for example, using a questionnaire that can be scored numerically, and we look at the various statistical analyses that can be performed on that. At the end of second year, you have the choice of whether you want to continue with the 3-year psychology degree program or transfer over onto the 4-year course. So the 4-year course is the additional year in that course is a placement year. So essentially it's a sandwich course where you would do the first 2 years of your undergraduate degree in psychology. You would then do a year's work placement with one of our employability partners. So this would be a paid placement. So you would be on a salary for the year, applying the skills that you've learned so far in the workplace. And then after that year, you would return to Queen's and complete your final year of the undergraduate program. So this is open to all students on an opt-in basis. There are a couple of conditions about transferring onto this. So you must obviously have a placement. It has to be salaried as well, so it can't be a voluntary placement. It has to be full-time, so around 37 hours per week, and you have to be on placement for at least 40 weeks, including your holidays. And in the next slide, I'll show you some of the employability partners that we have. And our graduates who go in this program have fed back that it's incredibly useful for them when it comes to graduation, to show that they've got a year's worth of experience of applying psychology in the workplace, and they go into all sorts of interesting areas and employers during their placement. Then we have the 3rd year of our program, or the final year. This is really the opportunity for you guys to put your own stamp on your psychology degree. So by 3rd year, you will have an idea of where your interests lie within psychology. And so for that reason, we have the 3rd year is made up of a selection of optional modules. So students have the opportunity to pick and choose from a selection of modules according to their interests and according to their ambitions regarding the areas of psychology that they want to go into as a career. So I've put some examples of optional modules in the table. So this isn't comprehensive. There are more modules than I could fit on the slide, but it's just to give you an idea of the range of different areas that students choose to study in their 3rd year. So anything from clinical psychology, developmental disorders in children, sports and exercise psychology, looking at forensic psychology with a focus on interpersonal violence from the perspectives of both victims and offenders, through to social psychology modules, so the psychology of intergroup relations, evolutionary psychology, gender psychology, and then using nudges to change behavior. So looking at how we can, that module looks at how we can design interventions to create behavioral change at the population level by altering the environment slightly. So you have the option of picking and choosing the modules that you're particularly interested in 3rd year. I've highlighted the placement module there. So this is a single semester module whereby students will go out on work placement and apply psychology with an employer in that place of work. So it's a little bit like the year-long placement. And we've put that in there for students who have chosen, for whatever reason, not to take a full year out and do the full year placement sandwich year, but who still want that experience of working and applying working in an applied setting as part of their undergraduate degree. So this is an academic module. So you would cover the psychology of employability. You would work on a psychological project within a workplace, and then you would write that up and present it as coursework and be assigned a mark for that module. So for those students who don't take the year-long placement, you have the option of taking a smaller placement, a single semester placement in this module. Alongside those optional modules, you also do what we call the psychology thesis module. So this is where you would undertake across the entire year a piece of independent research. So you would work under the supervision of an academic member of staff to design a psychology research project. So you would identify an area of psychology that you're interested in. You would identify an important question that you'd like to answer. You would then design a psychological research study to collect data, analyze that data, and then answer the question that you had initially proposed. So this is something that you would work on in small groups with other students, but you would write up the results of that work as an individual research thesis for a final year project. Within this module as well, you would also return to thinking about how psychology can be applied in everyday life and in applied settings. And there's an exam paper so that you can show the full range of knowledge and skills that you've developed across your 3 years, and how and show off your skills at applying psychology in everyday life. So here's a list of some of our employability placement providers that we've worked with in the past. So you can see there's a good range of sectors available. And as I said, this isn't a comprehensive list. We have many more employers that we will work with. This is just to give you a flavour of the different areas in which our students go out on placement and work with. We also will work with students who have a particular area or who have a particular interest in an area. So our students are also free to find their own placements, and we will support them in that and talk to the employers on their behalf and help them arrange placements if at all possible. So you're free to find your own placements as well as working with one of our existing providers. So as I said, our undergraduate degree is recognised by the British and accredited by the British Psychological Society. That's very important, particularly for students who want to go on to postgraduate study to qualify as a practitioner psychologist. So most postgraduate professional courses have a requirement that the applicants have an accredited undergraduate degree in psychology in order to apply for those courses, and that's what our degree will give you. So as the course is accredited, you're also eligible to apply on graduation for membership of the British Psychological Society. And in fact, what we offer all students on the course is the opportunity to become student members of the British Psychological Society. So starting from day one, when you come in first year, the school will pay for you to be a student member of the British Psychological Society, and you'll have access to their full range of resources for members on that basis. So that's something the school provides for all our students, because we feel it's important to invest in you and invest in your ambitions to be a psychologist right from day one. So in terms of learning and assessment then, the course has a nice mix of large group teaching of lectures. We have small group teaching in terms of tutorials, where you would meet up in groups of around 10 with an academic member of staff to discuss what you're currently learning about in those larger lectures, where you kind of around 150 people in with you. We also have laboratory classes. So these are happen in our computer suite. And this is where you learn the practical skills of being a psychologist. So how to collect data, how to run experiments, and how to analyze that data using specialist statistical computer programs. You do all that in practical laboratory classes. In terms of assessments then, there's a nice mix as well between summative exam assessments at the end of the year, but also continuous assessments in the form of coursework. So as well as doing end of year exams, you'll also be doing a nice mix of coursework throughout the year. And that can range from writing traditional essays to doing group research reports and mini research projects, through to giving group presentations and developing your communication skills. And also we have some nice peer assessments as well, where you would work together as groups and then evaluate each other on the basis of your individual contributions. So there's a varied mix of ways in which we assess students and ways in which you can show how you've met the programme learning outcomes. In terms of support that you can expect with us, I've just listed the key people who you will come into contact with throughout your time of study with us. So every student will have a named advisor of studies. So these are senior members of staff who are there to help with making academic choices and also to advise you if you're having particular difficulties with your courses, for example, due to perhaps illness or disability. You will also be assigned a personal tutor. So these are members of staff that you'll meet with on a regular basis in small groups, and their role is to promote your reflection on your learning and also to help you develop your academic skills throughout the course. So, for example, your critical thinking skills, your writing skills, and so forth. So you'll meet up with your personal tutors very regularly, every week, every 2 weeks on average. You also have a host of lecturers and module coordinators who will be there to support you with the course content. So in other words, the lecturers who are teaching you in class will also be available to answer questions on the content that they've taught. And we really do pride ourselves on the excellent pastoral and academic support that we give our students. So you'll always have someone to touch base with if you encounter any issues throughout your studies with us. So in terms of your future career, so what can you do with a degree in psychology? There are two kind of main areas or career routes that you can take. One is to go into kind of the traditional psychology professional domains. So you could qualify as a practitioner psychologist. To do this, you would have to do postgraduate study in order to be qualified to practice with clients or with patients. So those those professional domains are on the left-hand column, so clinical psychology, educational psychology, right the way through to counselling psychology. These career pathways all require postgraduate degrees and postgraduate study. That your undergraduate degree is a prerequisite for. So you need to get your undergraduate degree in psychology first, and then that will make you eligible to apply for these postgraduate courses to qualify as practitioner psychologists. Another kind of career route that many graduates take is outside of those kind of traditional core domains of psychology. So we find that a lot of our graduates go into management and the civil service fast stream. They work in areas as varied as the insurance industry, human resources, learning and development, marketing and sales. Other students go off and do other qualifications, so for example PGCEs to go into teaching. They go off and qualify as social workers or embark on a career in academia and in psychological research. So psychology is really it's a great degree if you're not too sure what you want to do as yet, because as you can see, you've got two main options. You can either continue in a career in psychology, or you can go off and do something completely different and apply your knowledge of human behaviour in a wide variety of well-paid careers, graduate careers. So how do you get in? Well, our entry requirements are currently an A-level or A-level equivalent of ABB and GCSE Maths Grade C. I just wanted to make you aware that we are planning to change our entry requirements for entry next September, so in September 2021. And that change is we will require at least one science subject at A-level in order to have an ABB A-level entry requirement, plus your Maths GCSE Grade C. If you don't study a science subject or science-related subject at A-level, then the entry requirement will be AAB. So AAB at A-level plus GCSE Maths, unless you have a science subject at A-level, in which case it's ABB, where one of those is a science.